They say the worst part isn't hearing her cry. It's when the crying stops and you realize she's found you. I used to guide tourists through Xochimilco at night. The canals, the trajineras, the floating gardens lit by strings of colored bulbs. It all seemed harmless, festive even. But there's a difference between the canals at sunset and the canals at 3 in the morning when the music dies and the fog rolls in thick enough to choke on. That's when you learn why the locals won't go near the water after dark. Why families who've lived here for generations cross themselves when they hear a woman's voice drifting across the mist. Why my abuela warned me, in a voice that didn't sound like hers anymore, that if I ever heard weeping near the water, I should run and never, ever look back. Her name is La Llorona, the weeping woman. And before you think you know this story, before you assume it's just another ghost tale told to scare children into obedience, let me tell you what they don't mention in the folklore books. Let me tell you what happens when the legend walks off the page and stands at the edge of your boat, dripping and reaching and whispering your name like she's known it all along. The story goes back to the colonial era, though some say she's older than that, older than the Spanish, older than the pyramids themselves. A woman, beautiful and desperate, drowns her children in a moment of madness. Some versions say it was jealousy over a faithless lover. Others claim it was poverty and starvation, a mercy killing that destroyed her soul. In every version, she realizes what she's done too late. She searches for them in the water, screaming until her voice breaks, until the river takes her too. And now she wanders the canals of Xochimilco, crying out for her lost children, her voice echoing off the ancient stone and wooden boats. ¿Dónde están mis hijos? Where are my children? But here's what they don't tell you in the tourist shops selling little figurines and embroidered shirts. They don't tell you that people still hear her. Not as some distant echo from centuries past, but now, last month, last week, last night. They don't tell you that she doesn't just wander aimlessly. She's looking for something specific, for someone specific. And if you're alone on the water when the mist comes in, if you're the right age or the right build, or maybe just unlucky enough to be in the wrong place when the veil between her world and ours grows thin, she'll mistake you for one of her drowned children. She'll come for you, and the locals will find your trajinera floating empty in the morning, rocking gently in the current, with nothing but wet footprints on the wood and your phone still recording, the last few minutes filled with nothing but the sound of weeping and your own voice, growing fainter, saying, "No, no, no, please, I'm not who you think I am." I was 19 when I took the job. The pay was good, the hours were flexible, and I thought I was too smart, too modern, too rational to believe in ghosts. My route took me through the less touristy parts of Xochimilco, past the island of the dolls where thousands of decaying toys hang from trees like warnings, through narrow channels where the water turns black and still. During the day, it was eerie but manageable. At night, it was something else entirely. The first time I heard her, I thought it was a radio, a distant television, someone's drunk girlfriend stumbling home from a party. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. A woman's voice sobbing in Spanish, calling out names I couldn't quite make out. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then faded into the hiss of the wind through the reeds. I told myself it was nothing. I kept rowing. But my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the pole. The second time, I was alone. It was late October, a Thursday night, and I was heading back to the dock after dropping off a group of Americans who'd wanted the authentic ghost experience. I'd given them the sanitized version of the story, thrown in some dramatic pauses, made sure they got their money's worth of manufactured scares. But now they were gone, and I was by myself in the dark, with only a dying flashlight and the sound of my own breathing. The fog came in fast, the way it does sometimes, swallowing the stars and the distant lights of the city until I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. And that's when I heard her again. Closer this time. Clearer. The sound of a woman crying so hard it sounded like drowning. Like her lungs were full of water and she was trying to breathe and weep at the same time. Would you have kept rowing? Or would you have stopped like I did and listened? I'm not proud of what I did next. I called out. I asked if someone needed help. I actually thought in that moment that it might be a real person, someone in trouble. someone I could save. The crying stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It stretched out for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. And then I heard it. A voice, soft and wet and impossibly close, right behind my left ear. ¿Eres tú, mijo? ¿Has vuelto a mí? Are you my son? Have you come back to me? I spun around so fast I nearly capsized the trajinera. There was no one there, just the fog and the water and the distant shapes of trees that looked wrong in the darkness, too tall and too thin, like they were watching. I grabbed the pole and pushed off hard, rowing faster than I ever had in my life, not caring where I was going as long as it was away. Behind me, I heard the crying start again, but now it sounded angry, accusing, like I'd betrayed her by running, like I'd promised something I couldn't deliver. I made it back to the dock. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, too many horror movies. But 2 nights later, I was back on the water. Because bills don't pay themselves, and because some part of me, the part that's always been drawn to darkness and danger and things that shouldn't exist, wanted to hear her again. Tell me in the comments if that makes me insane, because maybe it does. The third time was different. I wasn't alone. I had a couple with me, locals celebrating their anniversary, and they'd asked specifically to see the places where La Llorona had been sighted. I took them through the old channels, past abandoned chinampas and half-sunken boats, telling them the stories I'd memorized. And then, right as we passed under a low stone bridge covered in moss and decay, the woman in my boat froze. She grabbed her husband's arm hard enough to leave marks and pointed at the water ahead. "Mira," she whispered. "Look." There was something white in the fog. A shape. It was moving toward us, gliding across the surface of the water without making a sound. As it got closer, I could make out details. A pale dress that clung to a thin frame, long black hair that hung wet and heavy, and a face that was turned away, looking down at the water as if searching for something beneath the surface. She was singing now, not crying. A lullaby in Spanish, the kind my grandmother used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. The kind you sing to children you love. The couple wanted to leave. I started to turn the trajinera around, but before I could, the figure in the water looked up, and I saw her face. Or rather, I saw where her face should have been. Because there was nothing there but darkness, a void that seemed to pull at the light around it, and 2 points of brightness where her eyes might have been, watching us with an intelligence that was ancient and hungry and desperately, devastatingly sad. The couple screamed. I don't remember rowing back. I don't remember what I said to them or how much they paid me or whether they reported what they'd seen. All I remember is the sound of that lullaby following us through the fog, and the feeling that I'd looked at something I was never supposed to see, something that had looked back and recognized me. I quit the next day. I told my boss I was moving away for school. I didn't tell him that I couldn't sleep anymore, that every time I closed my eyes I saw that empty face and heard that waterlogged voice calling me mijo, my son, like she'd decided I was one of the children she'd lost. I didn't tell him that I'd started researching her, obsessively, staying up until dawn, reading accounts from the 16th century, from the 19th, from last year, trying to understand what she wanted, trying to understand why she was still here. Because if you believe this part, wait until you hear what comes next. There's a pattern. Every few years someone goes missing from the canals, usually a young man, sometimes a child. Their trajineras are found floating, undisturbed. Their belongings are still there. Phones, wallets, everything. But they're gone, vanished. And in the police reports, if you dig deep enough, there's always the same detail. Someone heard crying just before the disappearance. Someone saw a woman in white near the water. The last documented case was 3 months ago. A teenager, out with friends, filming for social media. They found his phone 2 days later, caught in the reeds. The video was still recording. Most of it was too dark to see anything, but you could hear him talking, laughing, making jokes about La Llorona. And then you could hear the crying start, and you could hear him stop laughing. And right at the end,
Just before the video cuts out, you can hear him say, very quietly, very calmly, "I'm sorry. I thought you were my mom. I watched that video. I shouldn't have, but I did." And in the last 3 seconds, there's a reflection in the water. A face, not his, and it's smiling. They never found his body. So here's what I know now, what I've learned from old women who cross themselves when they speak, and from priests who won't go near the canals after dark. La Llorona isn't just a ghost.
She's a grief that never ended, a guilt that ate its own heart and kept beating anyway. She doesn't just wander, she hunts. She looks for children, yes, but she also looks for anyone who reminds her of what she lost. Anyone who carries that particular frequency of loneliness or loss or love gone wrong. And when she finds them, when she gets close enough to touch, she doesn't just take them, she makes them remember. Every moment of pain they've ever caused, every mistake they've never forgiven themselves for, every person they've failed. And then, when they're drowning in it, when they're begging for it to stop, she pulls them under. Because if she has to suffer forever, then she won't suffer alone. I haven't been back to Xochimilco since that night. I moved to a different part of the city, somewhere far from water, but sometimes when it rains hard enough, I hear it. That crying, that lullaby, coming from the bathroom, from the kitchen sink, from anywhere water gathers and remembers. And I know, with a certainty that feels like ice in my chest, that she hasn't forgotten me, that she's still looking, that one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe 20 years from now, I'll hear her voice again, and this time, I won't have anywhere to run. If this story found you at 3 in the morning, if you're listening alone in the dark and you just heard something outside your window, then you're already closer to her world than you think. Subscribe if you want to know what they found in the water after the video stopped recording. Because what comes next isn't legend anymore. It's happening right now, and it's spreading.